Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this virtual professional development opportunity hosted by the Maine Department of Education. My name is Joe Schmidt, and I'm the Social Studies Specialist for the State Department of Education. Today, we have back for the third time talking about assessing online, Peter Paccone, and I'm going to turn it over to Peter to go ahead and introduce himself at this time. Take it away, Peter.
Thank you, Joe. Really nice to be back. I always enjoy coming before the Maine teachers. First order of business I'm going to do here is actually share my screen. I've produced a little slideshow for you guys today. Assessing students while teaching online. Tammy or Jen, Elizabeth, you want to just give me a thumbs up? Can you see that now? The first slide, there we go, great. So to get started here, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to go ahead and make this full screen. I am a San Marino High School social studies teacher. I have been teaching at this public high school, high achieving public high school, just northeast of downtown Los Angeles for over 30 years now. I also do some speaking and some presenting. I blog, and I also have a podcast, which I'm going to talk about at the end of the period or at the end of a seminar, the workshop, whatever we're calling this today. Something that you all may find a little bit interesting. I do have quite a bit of experience with online learning and online teaching. I produced for PBS an article here just recently entitled 15 Lessons Learned, relatively long article. I don't normally post or publish something like that, but PBS liked it. And so we went ahead and got it out there, and you can take a look at that by just clicking on the link. There we go. The way I want to start this off today is by sharing with you something that my school's principal said during our first faculty meeting this year. And what he said was this: the best way to quiz and test students in an online environment is to first put before the students one or more project-based learning activities, and then ask the students periodically and certainly upon completion of the PBL to orally explain what they have learned. Now, this was a very interesting statement that our principal made. I think it would be fair to say that many of the teachers at my school, though incredibly gifted and talented, aren't very familiar with this term PBL. Whether they are integrating PBL in their course already, they may not even be aware. Certainly, I'm not aware of too many teachers around here having moved into the area of PBL. And the concept of oral assessment, certainly was something that none of us really have much explored, if at all. So this was quite an extraordinary statement for him. To compound that, let me show you the next one here. We then, this past Friday, had a trauma training. And in large part because of my experience with online teaching, but also with the concept of oral assessment, I went ahead and decided to respond to that training. Now, much of this was all in place already. But first and foremost, what I decided to do was to limit my content to no more than 60% of the total number of minutes allotted for instruction, and 40% of that for PBLs. Now this, from a teacher who's teaching at a high-achieving school and teaching 5 periods of AP US history. So that 60-40 split is really pushing the envelope. Even people who are talking a lot about PBL, experts of PBL, are saying, well, try for 80-20, something like that, certainly in the first year and the second year. But I've been doing PBL for a long time, and I do have, as I said, a considerable amount of experience with oral assessment. So now, just to back this out for a second, let's just realize that if there's one area of focus that all teachers are talking about, especially AP teachers, but all teachers, it's this question of how to assess if we cannot bring students into our class and then try to respond to the cheating issue, if you will, by simply watching them. I mean, if they're online, how are we going to do that? So if you're a teacher who is doing some kind of hybrid, and you are able to bring your students into the room for the sake of testing, this particular presentation that I'm giving today may not prove of real value to you, because this one, focusing on the oral assessment, is attempting to bring forward really the only cheat-proof way of testing your students. And as I said, I set that up with a 60-40 split. But on the other hand, again, for those of you who are doing hybrid or who are 100% online, but may not have any interest at all in the concept of oral assessment, I have got some great articles for you here towards the tail end of this presentation, and then a little promise for some more, which we'll get to in a bit. So in any event, I have this 60-40 split, which I recognize is huge for AP, unheard of, if you will, for most of AP, although the Lucas Foundation here on the West Coast thinks it certainly can go 60-40 PBL, maybe even 80-20 PBL, if you're at all familiar with that. But in any event, 60-40. And then the other thing I do, and now to get right to the issue of assessment, is I make all of my tests, all of my quizzes, FRQ, free response questions, short answer question, long answer question, DBQs, any kind of writing, formative. I make them all formative. I don't enter them into the grade book. Why? Well, in large part because I just cannot be sure to what extent the students have done that work on their own. The one exception to that, one time per quarter, is I administer an oral exam and I administer it to the students who have earned a B or lower and are seeking to bring their grade up, but not to the A or the A minus. So I ran this by, and I have some more conclusions that I've reached as a result of this trauma training, but I ran this by a friend of mine, a very accomplished teacher. Joe knows him. I've talked about him here before. Good friend, great teacher, Scott Petrie, while on a bike ride the other day, talking to him on the phone. And Scott said, wow, Peter, he said, you know, that's going pretty far. He said, I'm not so sure that, certainly I haven't gone that far, but he said, if I were to be in your room for this particular presentation, I'd just be really intrigued to see where you're going to go with this. So the other point I want to make here, again, responding to the trauma training workshop and responding to what my principal said at the beginning of the year, also responding to what many others have said, who I'm going to be mentioning here in a little while. I'm only requiring some of the assigned work to be completed, making much of my work optional, and then digitally praising and recognizing the students who've completed high quality optional work in the same manner that a football coach might recognize one of his players for outstanding game day kind of play. In other words, helmet stickers. So digital helmet stickers, all expressing different degrees of accomplishment. Bottom line, my focus, if you will, is awarding and recognizing the positive with all but, and I realize this is a big step for a lot, with all but giving a relative pass to those who, for whatever reason, don't rise up to hopes and expectations. I'm well aware there are certain schools out there that may, in essence, be demanding an alternative educational philosophy, but that is where I'm beginning. And I wanted to put that up front so that you get a better idea of what I'm talking about with my kind of assessments. So following my school's principal lead, and despite our district's always on camera policy, there's something else I've been doing. And that is becoming ever more cognizant of the need for all of us, students and teachers included, and these are my principal's words, to reduce screen time. Now our district says always on, but my principal has said, yeah, that's fine, keep them always on, but don't hesitate to allow them to step away from their screens, close their eyes, do a minute of meditation, take a lap around the house, read a text offline, write a paper, and so on. And lastly, 10%, if you will, and the math might not all add up here, I realize now, but on Fridays, it's if you will, like an extended office hour of sorts, only 17-minute classes, so that's where that 10% figure comes from, though I realize I'm well over 100. I'm opening that up for just class discussion, so no teaching of content there either, okay? So, all in all, before I get into how I am assessing orally, and then also putting before you where you can go to learn about some very cool forms of assessment by some of the experts who've written some wonderful articles about it. My philosophy at this point is an offer of grace and understanding to those in need, yet at the same time to those who want the providing of many significant high-end learning opportunities. So it's not as if I'm saying no work. It's not as if I'm saying a reduction of work. I'm in fact putting serious work in front of my students. But it's the kind of work and the kind of opportunity where I want them to feel engaged and empowered. I want them to feel like they again have some kind of meaningful voice and choice over their learning, which I feel they have lost, which I feel is in large part responsible for the stress and anxiety. But at the same time, for those students who do want to work and want to reach for the stars and are willing to make that effort despite whatever stress and anxiety it causes them, and the students who do want to produce the kind of work that will open up the eyes of their parents to say, wow, or their college admission officers, or even just their teachers, I'm also putting that kind of work before them. So to get to the structure of my oral exams, and this based on a wonderful resource, which I'm going to be sharing with you later on. In fact, some of the wording of what you're going to now see in the next several slides comes directly from that resource. I believe it's called A Short Guide to Oral Assessment or something along those lines. At the start of every unit, I provide my students with 10 to 50 questions. Now keep in mind it's an AP class, but if my regular US history class, my regular world history class, freshmen and sophomores, it would probably be somewhere in the realm of 10 to 20 questions max. With each of these questions designed to reveal my students' content knowledge, but only in terms of what they need to know and not would be nice to know. So for the US history class, 1491, 1607, the first unit, I've put up there some of those questions that I literally put before the students. These are not what we'd call essential questions. These are questions that are designed to give students an opportunity to reveal their content knowledge. Because at this point in time, what I'm really talking about here, if I haven't yet made it clear, are assessments that reveal content knowledge, not assessments that reveal skills, public speaking skill, research skill, writing skill, etc. So here are the questions I put before them. What did all Native Americans have in common before 1491? In the AP course, there's a considerable amount of information that comes forward, being able to compare and contrast the Native Americans through all portions of the country and so on. What was this thing called the Columbian Exchange, and why is the colony of Roanoke declared or referred to as a lost colony? I'm going to give you just a few more examples. What is the encomienda system? And what did this term New France refer to? And then a little bit more complicated questions above. What effect did European contact have on African Americans? And what effect did European contact with Africans have on Europeans? So I put these questions out before the students. And then after having received these questions, and right up until the day of the unit exam, in this case, the unit 1 exam, the students are expected to create a content-rich answer to each of these questions. Now, the term content-rich, a little tough to define, somewhere in the realm of 3 to 7 sentences. I want them to be able to answer each question directly, accurately, and fully. In the US history course, what we say is we also want the students to be able to describe what went before each of the things they're describing, plus the short and long-term effect of both. So in other words, what was there before New France? What was New France? And then what was the short and long-term effect of this thing called New France? Same thing with the encomienda system and so on. And of course, a little harder to do when we're talking about Unit 1. But so I put these questions before them. I give them the entire period, meaning the entire length of time that we're spending on Unit 1, to find the answers, to create the answers, 3 to 7 sentences. And then on test day, I will give them a multiple choice test. I will give them the very same test I've always given. They're taking it at home. There is no way at all that I know whether or not they are gaining or attempting to gain some kind of unfair advantage. And I tell them that. I'm not going to police it. I'm not going to try to police. I'm aware of the kind of programs and opportunities there are for that kind of policing. I'm not so sure I buy that at 100%. And I just tell them, look, this is up to you now. The learning, it's your call. And when you're done, there will be a score received. I do it by way of Schoology, so they get the score back immediately. I have a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet comes to me, and I tell the students, so, okay, I've seen your score as well now. So if you have received, and it's over a certain percentage, which Basically, if you've received an A or an A minus, feel free to just color in on that spreadsheet. I'm not even going to do it. You do it. Color in green. And in that case, just let us know that you're well on your way. The rest of you don't worry about it. It's fine. We'll just take a look. So it's awarding and rewarding, praising the positive. So I put this, once they've done that multiple choice test, then I also will periodically put before them the oral assessment. And I will say something like level 1 follow-up questions. So if the script, when they're answering these questions, any one of these, let's back this out, I'm a little confusing here. So I'll say, what is the encomienda system to one of these students in a breakout room? And if that student reads off their script and it sounds scripted, then I may ask them to explain that in their own words. And if they're giving me a lot of multi-syllabic words or words that we didn't teach during the unit, and I'm wondering, do they even know the meaning of that word? I'll ask them that. Follow-up question, level 1. If they didn't include some relevant bit of information, I will ask them about, hey, we covered this in class, but you didn't mention it. Why don't you explain that to me? What do you think that is? And then depending on how well they do and how well they're able to handle that situation, I may kick it up to level 2 kinds of questions, all designed to further reveal the student's content knowledge, but at the same time to display a deeper learning. And so what I might do there is, if my first question was, what does the term New France refer to? I might follow with something like this. In this unit, we looked closely at a map of New France. Describe New France geographically. In other words, where was it? North, south, east, west? And how would you describe the land contained within New France? A second level kind of question. When it comes to the Columbian Exchange, they might have said to me, look, the Columbian Exchange was what Europeans brought over here, what they found over here and went back to Europe, as well as what Europeans brought to Africa, and from Africa went back up to Europe, triangular, if you will. I might follow with, well, then what were some of the useful aspects of Native American culture adopted by the Europeans, and some of the useful aspects of European culture? And typically a student might say, well, I'm not even sure I understand your question. And then I'll say, well, let's just talk about some of the traditions, practices, beliefs, maybe religion, article of clothing. I might even go so far as say, here's a clue for you, chocolate. How did that play into the Columbian Exchange? Essentially looking for an answer, maybe something like, oh, I see where you're going with this. Europeans never had chocolate until the Columbian Exchange, and then explaining to me what they had learned and what was taught in the AP US history class about chocolate coming to Europe or something like that. And then you can see down at the bottom, if my first question was, what is the year 1491 known for? I might follow up with, well, all right, so you've told me 1491 was the year before Columbus. It was the last year where Native American society was able to progress free of European contact and whatever that meant for Native American societies. But now why did the following year the Spanish come here? And then sometime after that, why did the French and the British come here? Just in your own words, explain that to me. And so the entire assessment takes more than 10 minutes, and I give them some kind of grade. Certainly not as objective as multiple choice. It's not as if we can clearly say A minus, whatever, but it's just a form of feedback and a way to see whether or not some of those green bars are rightfully earned, or whether or not an alternative form of assessment works for a student as opposed to the multiple choice tests. And FYI, when I was in high school, and still to this day, I'd probably be a lawyer today, except for the fact that I can't do multiple choice. My eyes just roll over on that kind of stuff, and my brain goes dead. But if somebody asks me a question, as I'm asking here and now, it somehow is easier. And I do find that there are many students that can do just that, surprisingly and interestingly. So the next question is, assuming that we kind of can buy into that a little bit, and I do have teachers at the middle school level who are experimenting, not necessarily in the San Marino Unified School District, though I did hear from one yesterday, and he said, yeah, he most definitely is. but other schools experimenting. Well, how do you grade this? Something like this. And that script that the students are producing so that they can, if they will, even read off the answer to those questions that they give them at the beginning of every unit. Well, that script requires a little bit of research, and so I give that 10%, value of 10%. The oral communication skill, how well did they present it? 20%. Comprehension skill, did they really understand what they were saying? And then the ability to answer the follow-ups at 50%, because that's really where you test for the content knowledge, in my opinion. And I realize that today there's this whole discussion nationally about whether we should even be testing for content knowledge anymore. Content used to be king. Has it been dethroned? Is that what the online era really is all about? Is that why my principal said PBL? And it's a great discussion we're having, but in the world of AP, and certainly at high achieving schools, even in non-AP, and I'm not so sure about other schools because they all differ, content still really does play an important role, and therefore I've gone down this path. So if you are at all considering this, and I'm going to want to keep my eye on the clock here because I do want to hear from you and turn this into a little bit of a discussion, see if we can explore this together a little bit further than rather having me just talk the entire time that we have. Some reasons to test orally. First and foremost, and I've spent a lot of time looking into this, I am thoroughly 100% convinced, though no assessment is uncheatable, by far, if you're going to get as close to being cheat proof with oral assessment as anything. Everything else falls off from that considerably. So one reason is so that you can find out really what does a student know. Another good reason, oral exams do motivate students to prepare thoroughly. And now I'm just going to introduce this. No matter what comfort level you may think I have in front of this camera, public speaking, I will share with you, it has been a long, long journey. And though, yes, I would have been comfortable answering a teacher's questions in high school had he or she asked me the kind of questions I'm now posing to my students, I would only have been comfortable doing that in an office setting. I would not have been comfortable doing that in a class. So I'm sure there are many of you who are seeing the second bullet point, and you're already getting to the series of slides I'm going to show here in a minute, which is reasons why not to test orally. And the answer is obviously because though it may have a motivating effect on some students to take the test more seriously and therefore learn more seriously, on other students, the anxiety that's going to come about at this thought, which I certainly can relate to, because in high school, if there was anything true about me, it was extremely social phobic. This has been a tremendous journey for me. I couldn't have done it. It would not have motivated me. It probably would have gone the other way. And so we have to be careful about that and consider it, and we can talk about that too. But certainly I have found that for large numbers of students, percentages of students, the oral exam motivates them to more thoroughly learn the topic. The other thing is oral exams ensure students understand questions. If I make one thing clear from the outset, if you don't understand my question, just ask. Put the responsibility on me to ask the question in a way that you can understand. Whereas with a multiple choice or an essay prompt or anything like that, if the question isn't particularly written well, if it's vague and if it's ambiguous, the student doesn't really have much of a chance other than to say, hey, can you come over here and explain this to me? And we know that's a disruption to the class. And we also know that in the world of AP, that just isn't even allowed. You just can't do it. It's always, this is the question, take it as it is, do the best you can. But in oral assessment, I can say, okay, fine, let me see if I can put this forward to you in simpler terms. And then lastly here, excuse me, oral exams don't just reveal content knowledge, but they clearly reveal the depth of content knowledge. So there now the flip side of the coin, reasons not to test orally. Oral exams cause students undue anxiety. How it is that I ever got to be as comfortable as I am today in front of an audience, it's you want to talk about a journey. It's a journey. It's a tremendous journey. I said earlier, probably one of the reasons I never became a lawyer was because of the anxiety associated with multiple choice tests. I don't even want to venture into that pool where maybe the better answer is, because I never wanted to stand up in a courtroom and speak because of the public speaking anxiety. A journey. Another reason why not to test orally is because they, like so many tests, you can't really eliminate the issue of bias. There are concerns sometimes expressed that teachers may be influenced by a student's classroom behavior, personality, dress, gender. There's no real way to prove, excuse me, that the student deserves the grade that you have given. Yes, you can record it. I will share with another teacher and let him serve as the appeals judge. Excuse me, just a second. I think I'm losing my voice, but the issue gets raised, the issue of bias. And then if you are seeking to use oral assessment to determine the content knowledge of an entire class, let's face it, you're talking an endless amount of time, even at 10 to 15 minutes per student. And so I don't assess every student, and I get administrative support for that. Realizing full well that I have a lot of teacher friends all across the country who I've talked to about this, and they've said no way would they ever get administrative support for something like that. When they test, they have to test everybody. Here, the position is, why would you ever test a kid who has gotten solid A performance throughout the course of a quarter? Why would you do that if you know that's what you have? It is only going to cause undue stress and anxiety. Test the students who you really have a doubt about. And of course, that then opens up a whole nother level of discussion. But I do not test all every unit. And lastly, another reason not to test orally, articulateness is not necessarily knowledge. I have some students who can string together some wonderful, wonderful sentences. They'll just keep on talking, and it's enjoyable to listen to, but they haven't really revealed anything. And yet you want to give them the credit. It's sometimes a hard challenge to have to face. So that's as far as I want to go with oral assessment, but now I want to introduce you to Andrew K. Miller. So Andrew, if you have not yet read any of Andrew's writings, you need to go to Edutopia and look him up. 2 fabulous Edutopia posts: formative assessment in distance learning, summative assessment in distance learning. We are all wondering how to test. And despite what I have put before you here today, I have spent endless time looking at Andrew's writing, going over it, thinking about it. I've worked some of it in for sure. It's not just oral assessment. I mean, yes, for grade, but when it comes to the formative kind of stuff, I mean, he really has some wonderful suggestions there. So I strongly recommend more on Andrew K. Miller in just a minute. Here is that document that so much of what I've put forward to you today is based on. It's called A Short Guide to Oral Assessment. Excellent 24-page read produced by this Gordon, and I'm not so sure how to pronounce his last name. It matters for reasons, along with more mention of Andrew K. Miller, which I'll get to at the end of the presentation. And then some other very good posts. I've been looking at these as well. I've got 1 slide, 2 slide, and all of these just recent. I mean, these have just been put out and put forward here within the last 2 or 3 months. I'm working my way through them. To be honest with you, all the ones that are down here that have a little bit of that should have been made smaller. have a subtitle of sorts, if you will. All of those were just presented to me today, again, by my good friend Scott Petrie, Dr. Scott Petrie, I guess I should say. All right. And now I'd like to share this with you, and then we're going to have about 20 to 30 minutes left, and I'd love to see if we can have open this up for a bit of a discussion. My principal starts off the year talking about PBL, online teaching, oral assessment. Others have as well. I'd like to introduce you to Titan Talk. Titan Talk it's a podcast, teacher-hosted, interview-formatted bi-monthly podcast, where we highlight two kinds of educators: those who have something of value to say in regards to teaching, learning, testing, and wellness, and those who have a personal story worth sharing. Now, I created Titan Talk right before school shut down in March. Our first guest was AP President Trevor Packer. Over the summer, with not having access to the studio, I was fortunate enough to, just prior to launching, have a donor put up the money so that we could have some nice equipment, some very nice studio equipment. We weren't able to take that home. I left it here. There was no way I was bringing it with me. And so over the summer, we scaled down Titan Talk, and we just did it by way of iPhone, something called Free Conference Call. And we also invited other teachers to stand in as the host. So it's Andrew Gale, who's a fellow SMUSD social studies teacher, and we do the hosting generally, but increasingly we've also allowed others to stand in for us. Now that we're back at school, we are kicking up the focus, and our interviews from here out, and we already have 2 of them done, will be all focusing on PBL, online teaching, and that includes oral assessment. And our first 2 guests, Michael McDowell, who is a PBL expert and really concerned about and writes about PBL alone is good, but oftentimes PBL rigor can be lost with PBL. And Dr. McDowell is trying to figure out how to bridge the need for rigor and the call for PBL. I love his work. We interviewed him. We also just recently interviewed Dr. Daniel Ching, who is also a PBL expert, just came out in August with a great book on PBL, the principal at Minarets High School here on the West Coast, San Francisco, Yosemite, near Yosemite. And you can listen to our interviews on Spotify. The reason that I want to share this with you is because, to go back here, an upcoming guest will be Andrew Miller, also PBL Works CEO, Bob Lenz, and others. And so this whole discussion we're starting here right now about PBL assessment, formative, summative, online, and so on. We're going to be learning a lot more about it. And if you want to follow and see what these guys have to say, we are fortunate enough, I am fortunate enough, I have simply created the podcast and then sent out invites, told people what the focus this year is going to be, and sent out invites. And one national leader after the other, Miller, Lenz, McDowell, Ching, others, they've all just agreed, we'll come on for an hour and answer your questions. And so if you are interested in learning even more about this as we go down the line, might want to follow and listen in. So that takes me to the 10-minute after the hour mark, which is exactly where I wanted to go, which leaves us 20 minutes. And I believe I've stopped sharing. Joe, can you see I've stopped sharing, right?
That is correct.
So I'm curious, I would love to hear back from the Maine teachers. The last couple times I've been here, you've asked me such great questions. And I meant to bring the notes in today, but I know that that some of the questions and some of the comments were so good that they led to substantive change in terms of some things that I was doing. So I was kind of wondering if that's going to be the case today. I think I'm going to start off this way, Joe, if we could. Let's see, you've made me, how come, do I not have a polling feature on here? Well, let's do it this way in the chat box. If I could, very quickly, scale of 1 to 10, based on what you heard today, 10 being, wow, I think I'm going to give oral assessment a try. 1 being, no way. Can we all just punch in a number there and see where you are with that? Oh, Mark, see, I want to go right to you. That's right away, yeah.
Peter, I made you the host if you do want to actually build in a poll.
Great, thanks. Yeah,
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So scale of 1 to 10, based on what I've said today, to what extent do you think you might want to try giving oral assessment a try? And a 10 would be, you know, that's kind of interesting. I think I'd like to do this. And a 1 being, no way, never going to do it, not for me. Oh, okay. So Leslie, we're going to want to hear about this. Yeah. Yeah. So if we can, we've got, yeah, okay. So I think the first thing I'm going to do, because we've got the time, I'm just going to go back up here. Mark, in my class, I ask a question. I always allow students to pass. I'm going to, you know, if you want to pass, feel free. But I'm curious, 3, no way, no real interest. Do you mind sharing with us your reasoning or your thinking from that?
I think at our school district, there'd be a huge pushback from the students, from the administration, and I just don't think it would go. I am not 100% a no, but I am pretty much, I know what I have for students this year.
Yeah.
I know what I've had in the past, and I just think that would be a hard sell.
What's the reasoning, do you think? Why for the hard sell?
Unfortunately, our students are very, very unmotivated as a whole. And this remote learning, it's a struggle here. Yeah. The face masks are a struggle. Getting anything out of them during class discussion is so far been difficult. And I can't see their expressions. They can't see mine. They're just, I don't know, maybe it's like a muzzle where they've been the quietest ever. I mean, we've had a month and the honeymoon period's over, so I thought I'd actually see some personalities by now, but I'm not. And it's the same thing every day, and I don't know. I just think it'd be a hard sell.
Mark, if you take it back to your school and anybody experiments with it, even if you experiment, and you find out that this hard sell, in fact, is disaster at your school, you know, feel free to contact me. And then let me just 30-minute interview on Titan Talk. And then you just say why it was and how that worked. Or if you find the opposite, anybody, I would love to try to bring the voice forward. It doesn't matter to me which way it goes, but I'd like to hear more about that. Isn't that right? And then moving down here to Joshua, same, a 3. Joshua, you can pass as well, but would you want to offer up why you think, why there's so little interest on something like that?
I'm sorry, I'm actually in the car driving, listening, so
yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure, loud and clear, yeah. You want to try it?
I not that I think it's anything wrong, I just think it's just not a good fit. Maybe my age group, middle school, 6th grade. You know, I was interested in some of your discussion leading towards, you know, flipping it on its head with content not being the driving force, and maybe that's sort of what we're looking at this year with our 6th graders. But yeah, just probably not the right time for me and with my students.
Joshua, did I understand you correctly that you have, and again, maybe de-emphasized content and moved more towards skills-based kind of learning?
I think, I mean, especially in this year with a hybrid model that we're not seeing our kids for 5 days a week, and there's so little FaceTime with our kids anyway that I don't foresee us utilizing much of that time to be content-based and instead trying to develop those skill-based, you know, really essential skills to be moving up through middle school and high school.
Yeah. See, where I am, it's 50-minute periods, 4 days a week, and then that 17-minute, basically office hour, if you will. So I totally get that. Are you doing PBL?
No, we're not doing PBL, no. But we're looking. I did there was a book club that Joe had in the spring, and so we're looking to build in some more inquiry-based activities.
As long as I have you here, PBL is, well, and could I ask why not PBL? I'd be really curious. And again, if I could preface all of that, I am well aware of the arguments in opposition to PBL. I realize PBL does not necessarily work for all. So, but do you know why have you guys not explored that, or curious?
I think no reason at this point. I think that's all on the table as we begin to build more of our skill-based model of trying to support students and develop their needs as citizens in our democracy.
Got it. And then lastly, you said you were driving, and I'm here in Los Angeles. As I came into the school, San Marino High School is just south of Pasadena. So if you look out my door and you look up the hill, you can see the smoke rising from the mountains. I mean, it just went straight up into the sky. Mount Wilson is still on fire. I mean, you can only imagine what the air quality has been like around here. And I'm picturing you, Joshua, driving, you said, through the state of Maine. And I got to believe it's picture perfect wherever you are. Is that the case?
It is pretty picture perfect. I actually used to teach in Ontario Montclair School District, so it's a different world. But I used to look out at Mount Baldy from a portable in my classroom, but I've had the ash falling down on me as well. But enjoy being out here in the great state of Maine.
Very nice. Thanks for sharing. Tammy, a 4. You want to comment on that 4?
Well, part of it, I think part of it is similar reasons as Mark and Joshua said, in terms of or more so Mark with the harder sell, both within the community and the staff. We argued for a couple of years just whether or not to continue to allow students with a certain grade point average to not have to take midterms and finals. And it was decided by the majority of the staff that everybody has to take midterms and finals no matter what your grade is, because if you had an A for the semester, you shouldn't have any trouble getting an A on the final exam, and it prepares them for college. I don't necessarily believe that myself. So I'm more of the thing in terms of like, I'd be willing to try it because I'm always trying to find ways to assess differently, because I'm not a big fan of multiple choice short answer. I teach mainly freshmen, and this year I have all freshmen, and we're very project based. But I don't know that we do it correctly, but we're project based. Sophomores is still predominantly like project or paper, like paper based in terms of doing research and kind of exploring a particular topic. And then when we get to junior year, because it's world freshman, the first half of U.S. history sophomore year, the second half of U.S. history junior year, it's very, very specific. It's very test oriented. And that group is really struggling right now to change what they're doing, and they're really floundering. And I'm one of the least stressed out teachers in the department because mine's based is mainly project based. I'm stressed out in terms of whether or not they're gonna have enough time to do everything that we're being told by our department chair that we need to do. Wow. That's more of my stress. So I just don't know. The traditional grading and the traditional way of doing things is still very much ingrained where I am. And the community looks at it that way too. I
think that would be a fair assessment of where I am. As I said, that's 60-40. I went way out on a limb there. We're going to find out. I'm 62, and certainly I'm not so sure I would have done it at 42, but with that age may come a little bit more. Well, what can I say? I'm not so quite sure how to finish that sentence. Let's go over here.
I'm 48. I'm different now than I was when I first started out. Yeah.
Yeah. So Leslie, we still have time. 10, you been doing oral assessment in your classroom for several years. Is that right?
Yeah, I have. Thanks, Peter. I started a couple of years ago when I moved to teaching social studies. And one of the first units was really focused on citizenship and government. And of course, we were teaching to the calendar and really working on Constitution Day and so forth. And I was pushing the kids to learn the preamble and learn the three branches and how they shared powers and how they checked and balanced. And for whatever reason, because it was my first time teaching one lesson, 4 times a day, I wasn't getting to know the kids and bonding with the kids the way I wanted to. And I made the decision that first assessment was going to be oral, sitting at my desk with me. And it's a currency I don't know if I can advocate hard enough for. The chance to talk to the kids, to calm them down, to build a relationship, to give them, like you said, kind of a little bit of a stressful environment, but to be able to say to them, hey, it's just you and me, don't worry about anybody else listening. And to find out specifically what content they had full control over and those gaps of where things were missing. To have a couple of little cheat sheets in front of me to say, okay, well, remember when we went over this? Yeah. What do you remember from that discussion? I had an absolute solid view on who knew what and when, which was fantastic for reteaching and the kids who need support, but it set the tone for the remainder of the year. I wouldn't have had to do another oral one again because those kids prepared so well and so thoroughly because it was important to them. They knew it was important that I knew what they knew, that it was worth it. And it was an incredible amount of time. We're talking about 55, 60 kids and me doing that at my desk for a 2-week period almost while they were working on projects, within the classroom. But it's still, it is incredibly time consuming, but it is absolutely an investment that is worth it.
I missed that. I'm sorry. What grade is this for? Are you doing this for?
It was at 6th grade. I'm now teaching 7th and I'll do it again.
So, wow. So 6th graders, huh? Interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Jen, there's a question mark there after a question mark. I'm not sure what that meant.
So I teach 3rd grade, so I have to do a lot of oral assessments. I just feel like it's a natural thing to do with elementary students. It's easier for them to articulate what they're thinking, but just by doing oral assessments. I don't really know when that stops, and it's unfortunate that it stops. And I'm completely remote. I'm 100% remote, so I get to see my students every day, which is great, even though it's on Zoom. But it's nice to be able to schedule that time, that one-on-one time with them to go over anything and everything. So, like I can do a math assessment with them and they can tell me the steps of the problem. They may not be able to solve it on paper, but they can maybe verbalize it and show me with all the new crazy gadgets that we have. And, they may not have the answer right, but they did the steps, so they can still, I know they did it. So I can still give them the credit that they need to show that they've mastered the skill. So I guess that's the advantage of being an elementary teacher. Yeah. Almost everything you can do oral assessments. Our reading can be an oral assessment. Yeah, I guess.
Wow. 3rd grade. So we've got
that's
third.
The sweet spot about 3rd grade.
That's the what? Was that?
That's the sweet spot about 3rd grade.
Is what? Is you can do about anything?
Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility in a lot of things.
So you're online now, 100% online?
I am. So our school is doing a hybrid model, but because we had a lot of parents choose remote, we have a grade in the elementary side, we have one teacher for each grade level that's strictly remote. So I have 19 remote students that I get to meet with every day, which is nice because the hybrid students are only in school 2 or 3 days a week, and I get to meet with my kids every day. So wow. It's exhausting. It's a lot of work. It's not like one class of 19 students. I have 19 classes that I have to pull off every day. But it's really fun.
That PBS article that I wrote, that's what I ended it with. It was the claim that no matter how experienced anyone is with online teaching, no matter what their knowledge is coming in, we are all, in essence, equivalent to being in the lead canoe of the Lewis and Clark expedition. We're all going to work like we've never worked before, and that means every day, and this is the word I hear over and over again. I wrote it in there, and I'm hearing it over and over again. All of us are feeling exhausted. That rowing every day, and it's these discoveries we're all making, whether they're positive or somehow threatening. But every day I get the feeling I'm learning something new. I imagine you are as well. So you're assessing these third graders online even now orally. That's what I wanted to
Yeah.
know. Wow.
Yep.
Wow. Is there anybody else who'd like to share here? We've got another 5 minutes.
I have a question for a second. I teach all the remote learners that are 8th graders at my school. So I have 50 students a day in 2 classes, class of 25 and another class of 25. We seem to be adding more kids all the time. I have a number of students who suffer from anxiety, and they will not even speak in a breakout room with 1 or 2 other people. I've had students go in a breakout room with me and not speak at all and just type into the chat. So I'm wondering how that's going to work for those individuals. In the past, what I've done is when I wasn't teaching remote, I would give, your regular paper pencil test. And then if students didn't do well, I'd pull them aside and have them tell me what they knew. And that was very easy to fill in the holes and know, what kids knew and what they didn't. Any suggestions for what to do with kids with anxiety that's so severe that they will not even talk? And I'll be reading the chat, and nobody can type fast enough in 15 minutes to really answer my questions.
The problem you're revealing is actually compounded, because there's, as you look into this whole issue of Zoom and so on, Zoom fatigue, there's the issue of public speaking. There's the issue of genuine certifiable fear of coming before a camera. And then there's the issue of just spending too many hours in front of the camera. So like earlier, when I said I was, and I'm relating to your students here, in a one-on-one office kind of setting, if a teacher and I had this discussion, it would be okay. In a classroom, there's no way I could have done it. No way. But the other thing is, put a camera in front of me, there's no way. Not back then. That line was impossible to cross. And even in more recent years, if there is a news, if anybody wants to put one of those kind of cameras before me, as has happened over the last few years when I've been interviewed for certain things to talk about education, oh my goodness, seeing one of those big boxes there, that just somehow sends the anxiety sky high. So I don't have an answer for you, Elizabeth, other than probably have to find another way, and certainly that opens the door up to students who use that as an excuse to just skate, which is tough, right?
Can I just chime in as somebody that has anxiety? I say just have a genuine conversation with them. Just, tell them that you empathize what they're going through, and then ask them what's best for them. If they, if maybe just chatting is what's good for them, just chat. Maybe have you utilized Jamboard? Maybe Jamboard is something that they would want to do, just an interactive, because some of these kids are so game-based that maybe doing the Jamboard, utilizing that with you, just having some of them just need to talk and have like a one-on-one conversation with someone. They don't want to look at, I know by the end of the day, I don't want to look at myself anymore. I'm so sick of seeing myself. And I can't, and some of the kids are cute, like I have 8-year-olds and they get right up in the camera and they're like looking at themselves, and then there's the others that, it's probably hard for them to look at themselves or even see their name on the screen. So maybe just having a genuine conversation and just, acknowledging that it's hard for them, and then just finding out what is best for them. And if it's not Zoom, maybe it is a chat feature or, Jamboard or who knows what's out there. We have so many things.
Yeah, Flipgrid or maybe not. Thank you, Jen.
Somebody had posted, Leslie Beers Huskins posted, what if students would respond in a Flipgrid style so they could record themselves without you as a live audience, and they could prepare their responses. And that sort of reminds me of what I do. When I was teaching 3rd grade ELA, I teach 4th grade now, and I was using Seesaw for the first time, and I just kept reminding them that it was like YouTube. They followed specific people and subscribed to different channels on YouTube. So that was like their big goal. They wanted to be YouTubers. And when they realized that they could write a script that was a reflection of what they had learned and then posted it for their families to see on Seesaw, I couldn't believe the change in them. That even though they were anxious, I would have a friend pair up with them, and we were lucky we had class iPads, and they would have a friend help them, like kind of coach them through it after I had scaffolded them for a while. And they would work on it together, and they would rehearse and practice, and we would do funny things like we'd pretend we were a studio. So if somebody was getting ready to record, we would say, live mic in 10 and then count down. And the kids were silent. They were so respectful of each other, and we turned it into something kind of fun. But I also feel like if you kind of make it sort of fun, like what Jen was saying, that they respond to that, and the reflection piece is huge. And I was really surprised at the feedback that kids were giving themselves and how they were really rising to the challenge.
I can definitely relate to that. I call them knockoff videos in the area of social studies, high school level. There are a lot of teachers out there who do some really nice work teaching the content. Adam Norris, Tom Ritchie, others, Steve Heimler, and I have the kids just create a knockoff video, try to teach some content like what these guys are doing, and then post to YouTube. And it's amazing the extent to which that opportunity will motivate some, not all, but some. Anybody else want to get in, say something here as we close out the session? Well then, I want to thank you all for having invited me back. Always enjoyable to come speak to the teachers of Maine. And if there's anyone who would like to be interviewed for Titan Talk on any of this, even if it's to just say, hey, Peter, I want to talk about your presentation. I tried it and it ended in a disaster. We'd love to have that voice heard and turn that into an episode. So you have my email, just reach out and we'll make it happen. And other than that, I wish you all a happy and healthy rest of the year. Everybody stay safe, and we'll hope to see you all again soon.